My name is Elowen Rusk, and I was 33 the morning my parents, my sister, and the man they once told me to give up walked into my Denver office without knowing I owned the company they were begging to hire. I remember the way the glass door opened, slow and soft, like even the building wanted to be polite before it ruined them. My mother stepped in first, wearing the same careful smile she used when she wanted a room to believe she had never done anything wrong. My father followed with his hands folded in front of him, his suit too formal for a design consultation. My sister Merritt came behind them, tired around the eyes but still polished, in the way our family praised like a religion. And Cal O'Dane, the man they had once decided made more sense beside her than beside me, stood at the reception desk with a folder under his arm and a desperate hope in his face. None of them looked at the name on the wall at first. People rarely do when they think they already understand the room. But then my receptionist said, "Miss Rusk will see you now." And I walked out from behind the frosted glass, and every color left my mother's face. The real story started 7 years earlier in Portland, Oregon, at a Thanksgiving dinner where my family measured my whole life, found it too small, and passed my future to my sister like it was one more dish on the table. Back then, I was 26, living in a small apartment above a laundromat on the east side of Portland, and working for a home staging company that paid me just enough to stay hopeful and just little enough to keep me scared. I spent my days moving chairs, choosing lamps, arguing with sunlight, and turning empty houses into places people could imagine living in. My boss liked me because I could walk into a room and know, before anyone said a word, why it felt wrong. Sometimes it was the lighting, sometimes it was the way the couch blocked the first view from the door. Sometimes it was the silence of a house that looked expensive but felt cold. I knew how to soften a space without making it weak. I knew how to make a hallway feel less like a tunnel and more like an invitation. I knew that people made decisions with their bodies before their minds caught up. Buyers would step inside one of our staged homes and suddenly stand taller, breathe slower, touch the edge of a table like they had already come home. My boss called it instinct. I called it listening. My family called it decorating. And they said the word like it came with glitter on it. In the Rusk family, a real career had weight. It had a license, a badge, a salary range, an office door, and preferably letters after your name. My father, Benton Rusk, had spent 32 years in commercial banking, and he believed life was a series of risks that should be avoided unless a spreadsheet gave you permission. My mother, Corinne, had never held one job for long, but she sat on enough charity boards to speak like a woman who had built half the city by hand. She believed in image the way some people believe in weather. It was always there, always moving, always something to dress for. My sister Merritt was their masterpiece. She was 3 years older than me, a pediatric dentist with a white coat, a bright clinic badge, and a wall full of framed certificates that made my mother's voice soften every time she mentioned them. Merritt helped children, my mother would say, as if that settled every argument before it started. Merritt had discipline. Merritt had direction. Merritt had a future you could explain in one sentence at a dinner party. I had fabric samples in my car, paint dust on my jeans, and a way of standing in corners to see how a room felt from the place nobody noticed. Our family house had a hallway wall my mother called the achievement wall. It had my father's banking awards, Merritt's dental school photo, Merritt holding oversized scissors at the opening of the clinic where she worked, my mother smiling beside the mayor at some fundraiser, even a newspaper clipping about my grandfather's old hardware store. Nothing of mine was there. Not the regional student design award I won at 22, not the photograph of a staged historic home that sold in 48 hours after sitting empty for 6 months. Not the thank you note from a widower who said, "I made his house look alive again after his wife died." Once, when I was tired enough to be brave, I asked my mother why none of my work was on the wall. She didn't even look embarrassed. She touched a frame with Merritt's face in it and said, "We just wanted to keep the wall professional, sweetheart." Professional. That word followed me around our house like perfume I was allergic to. It always smelled like someone else being chosen. Thanksgiving was my mother's favorite holiday because it let her control food, seating, conversation, and gratitude in one afternoon. She planned the table 3 weeks early. She polished silver nobody liked using. She wrote little cards in dark green ink and placed them at each setting. Merritt always sat near my father because they liked to talk about clinic budgets and insurance reimbursements. My mother sat across from them where she could watch everyone's face. I was usually placed at the end near the sideboard, close to the extra rolls, the water pitcher, and whatever dish needed carrying back to the kitchen. When we were children, I thought it was because I was the youngest. When I was 26, I understood it was because some families keep telling you where you belong, even after you are old enough to leave. No one ever said, "Elowen, you are less important." They just gave Merritt the proper chair and gave me the one that wobbled slightly on the old floorboards. They just asked me to grab more napkins while Merritt explained root canals to our aunt like she was saving lives in a war zone. They just called my work creative in the same tone people use for a child's drawing on a refrigerator. That year, I arrived with a secret folded inside my coat pocket. It was not a ring or a check or anything my family would know how to value. It was an acceptance letter from a small but respected commercial design apprenticeship in Denver. The firm specialized in clinics, offices, therapy practices, and public spaces. Not home staging, not pretty pillows, real human-centered design. I had applied months earlier without telling anyone, because hope is easier to protect before people start touching it. The pay was low, the hours would be terrible, I would have to leave Portland. But it was the first time a serious company had looked at my portfolio and seen more than decoration. The letter said they were impressed by my attention to emotional flow. I read those words so many times, the paper had started to soften at the folds. Emotional flow. It sounded almost foolish, almost too gentle for the world my father trusted. But to me, it felt like someone had finally named the thing I had been seeing my whole life. Cal O'Dane came with me that evening. We had been together for 3 years. Long enough for me to know the way his hand searched for mine under a table when he was nervous, and long enough for him to know I hated canned cranberry sauce, but ate it at my mother's house anyway because peace was sometimes cheaper than honesty. Callow was handsome in a warm, ordinary way. He worked as a commercial loan officer and liked to say he helped small businesses grow, though mostly he helped banks decide which dreams looked safe enough to fund. In the beginning, he loved my work because it made him feel close to something softer than his own world. He would come to staged houses after hours and watch me move a lamp 3 inches to the left. He would laugh and say, "You're the only person I know who can make silence look expensive." I thought that meant he understood me. Maybe he did for a while. Or maybe he only admired my dream when it stayed small enough not to threaten his need for approval. My parents liked Callow immediately. He had a clean shirt, a steady job, and a way of agreeing with my father that made Benton lean back with satisfaction. My mother liked him because he knew how to flatter without looking like he was trying. At first, their approval felt like a gift. I brought him to dinners and watched them include him in conversations they had never opened for me. My father asked Callow about interest rates, loan structures, business credit, things he had never once asked me about my work. My mother sent him home with leftovers and said, "A man who understands numbers is a man who understands life." I laughed the first time she said it. Then I noticed Callow did not laugh with me. He just looked pleased, like a boy who had finally been given the right answer after guessing for too long. Slow changes are the hardest to fight because there is never one clean moment you can point to and say, "There, that was the betrayal." Callow started staying late after family dinners, talking with my father in the living room while I helped my mother in the kitchen. He began asking Merritt about her clinic, her student loans, her future plans, her schedule. Merritt was careful with him at first, polite and distant, but my mother had a talent for making distance feel rude. She would say, "Merritt, tell Callow about the pediatric expansion. He understands business." Or, "Callow, you should hear how Merritt handled that difficult patient's parent. Such professionalism." Professionalism again, the old perfume. I watched Callow listen to my sister with the face he used when someone at the bank had a strong credit score. I told myself I was imagining things. Love makes a person very skilled at explaining away the facts that would save them. I should say this before the dinner breaks open. Merritt was not a cartoon villain. She was not cruel in the simple way that would make the story easier. She loved being praised, yes. She enjoyed being the safe daughter, the proof that our parents had raised at least one person correctly. But she was also tired. I could see it in the way she rubbed her jaw when she thought no one watched, the way her smile held too long after my mother bragged about her. Merritt had spent her whole life being rewarded for staying inside the lines, and after a while, even a cage made of praise is still a cage. I did not understand that then. All I saw was my sister sitting in the good chair, with my boyfriend laughing too easily at something she said, while my Denver letter pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat. Dinner began the way Rusk dinners always began, with my mother thanking God for stability, family, good work, and the blessings we had earned. Earned was a very important word to her. It separated good people from careless people, serious people from dreamers, Merritt from me. We passed turkey, potatoes, green beans, rolls. My father asked Callow about a bank merger. Merritt talked about a little boy who had stopped being afraid of dental cleanings. Everyone looked at her like she had personally returned sunshine to the city. I waited for a gap in the conversation. I touched the folded letter in my pocket and tried to imagine my mother's face changing into pride. It is embarrassing now how much I still wanted that. 26 years old, rent due in 6 days, already half-packed in my mind for a new city, and still hoping my mother would look at one piece of paper and finally see me. Before dessert, my father cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but every person at that table understood it. Benton Rusk did not clear his throat unless a decision had already been made. My mother set down her fork. Merritt looked at her plate. Callow's hand, which had been resting close to mine, moved away. I noticed that before I understood why. My father looked at Callow, then at Merritt, then somewhere near me, but not exactly at me. "We need to talk as a family," he said. The words sounded inclusive, but the room went cold in a way that told me I was not part of the we. My mother leaned forward with a soft face, the one she used right before saying something sharp enough to leave a mark. "Elowen," she said, "sometimes people care about you enough to say the difficult thing." I remember staring at the cranberry sauce. It had slid slightly to one side of the dish, glossy and red and ridiculous. That is what pain does sometimes. It chooses the strangest object in the room and pins your attention there because looking at the people would be too much. My mother kept talking. She said Callow was at an age where he needed to think about a stable future. She said he had a generous heart and could be pulled in the wrong direction by loyalty. She said Merritt understood responsibility in a way few people did. She said two practical people sometimes recognized a shared path before others were ready to accept it. Callow did not interrupt. Merritt did not interrupt. My father folded his hands and watched the table like he was reviewing a loan application. Then my mother said the sentence that took 7 years to stop echoing. "Merritt has a real career ahead of her. She can build a life Callow can trust. You are still arranging colors and calling it a plan." She said it gently. That was the worst part. If she had shouted, I could have shouted back. If she had thrown something, I could have named her cruel. But she said it like she was helping me understand gravity. My father added, quieter but heavier, "Pretty colors don't pay rent." 5 words. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a little stamp pressed onto everything I had ever loved. I looked at Callow then. Not my mother. Not Merritt. Callow. 3 years should have bought me one sentence. One hand on the table. One, "That's not fair?" One glance that said he still knew me. He looked down at his plate. The silence was the answer. I think something in me changed shape right there. Not broke, exactly. Breaking sounds sudden, like glass. This was slower. It was more like a door inside me, closing with a clean, final click. My mother kept speaking. She said no one wanted to hurt me. She said this was only about what made sense. She said I was talented, of course, but talent and adulthood were not the same thing. She said I would thank them one day for being honest. I sat there with the Denver letter in my pocket and realized my family had not invited me to dinner. They had invited me to witness my replacement. No one said, "Callow is leaving you for your sister." They were too polished for that. They talked around it with words like stability, timing, maturity, shared values. But the meaning sat in the center of the table between the turkey and the pie. Callow and Merritt had been speaking privately. My parents knew. They approved. Maybe they had encouraged it. Maybe they had arranged it one careful conversation at a time. I will never know all of it, and I stopped needing to. What mattered was this. They had discussed my heart without me. They had compared the two Rusk daughters like two business options and chosen the one with cleaner numbers. I was not a woman being hurt. I was a poor investment being moved off the books. I did not scream. People always expect the big scene. They want the plate shattered, the wine thrown, the speech that makes everyone gasp. But I had grown up in that house. I knew who would win a loud fight there. My mother would cry. My father would call me emotional. Merritt would sit very still and become the victim of my outburst. Callow would look relieved because my anger would prove he had chosen correctly. So I did the only thing they had not prepared for. I stayed calm. I took the folded letter from my pocket, placed it beside my plate, and smoothed it once with my fingers. "I was going to tell you I got the Denver apprenticeship," I said. My voice sounded far away but steady. "I leave in 3 weeks." My mother blinked. For the first time that night, she looked surprised. She picked up the letter like it might be dirty. Her eyes moved over the words, and I watched her search for a way to make it smaller. "Denver," she said finally, with a soft laugh. "For design." My father leaned back. "Elowen, this is not the moment to make a dramatic decision." That almost made me smile because the decision had been made months before, quietly and carefully, in the spaces where they never looked. "It isn't dramatic," I said. "It's signed." Merritt whispered my name, but I did not turn toward her. Callow finally looked up. His face was pale with the beginning of guilt, which is not the same as courage. He said, "Ellie, maybe we should talk." I hated that nickname in his mouth then. It sounded borrowed from a life he had already returned. "We already did," I said. "You just didn't use words." Then I stood, folded the Denver letter back into my pocket, and carried my plate to the kitchen because old training does not vanish just because your life has fallen apart. My hands moved automatically, plate in sink, fork on counter, napkin in trash. I remember the warm smell of turkey, the shine of the faucet, the tiny crack in the tile above the stove. I remember thinking, this is the last time I will stand in this kitchen as someone waiting to be chosen. My mother followed me in and lowered her voice. That was how I knew she was angry. Corinne Rusk never raised her voice when she was trying to win. "Do not punish this family because you are embarrassed," she said. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not a monster but something almost sadder. A woman so afraid of instability that she would rather wound her own daughter than admit safety was not the same as love. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm leaving." She crossed her arms. "You'll come home when the real world gets expensive." There it was. Her prophecy. Not shouted, not even cruel on the surface. Just certain. People who chase feelings always come back when feelings stop paying bills. I wanted to tell her the real world had been expensive in her house too. It had cost me my voice, my place, my boyfriend, my belief that love meant being seen. But I had only so much strength, and I decided not to spend it on explaining a room she refused to enter. I walked out through the dining room without saying goodbye. My father did not stand. Merritt covered her mouth with one hand. Callow took one step toward me, then stopped when my mother looked at him. That told me everything I needed for the road. 3 weeks later, I left Portland in a used silver hatchback with 2 suitcases, my laptop, a cheap desk lamp, a rolled floor plan tube, and the old swatch book I had carried since college. I almost threw the swatch book away the night before I left. It felt childish suddenly. All those little squares of fabric and paint, all that hope organized by color. Then I opened it and found on the back of a pale blue linen sample the words my father had written after dinner. I had not seen him do it. Maybe he had picked it up from the side table while I was in the kitchen. Maybe he had wanted to make sure the lesson followed me. In his neat banker handwriting, he had written, "Pretty colors don't pay rent." I stood in my empty apartment with the laundromat machines humming below me and felt the sentence land all over again. Then I closed the book, packed it in the passenger seat, and drove east before sunrise. Denver did not welcome me like a movie. There was no golden light, no perfect apartment, no wise stranger waiting to hand me a future. I rented a basement room from a retired nurse who kept the heat low and labeled every shelf in the refrigerator. The room had one small window at ground level, so in the mornings I saw shoes before faces. I worked at the design firm during the day and took small freelance staging jobs at night. I ate peanut butter on toast more often than any adult should. I learned bus routes in the snow. I learned that altitude makes crying harder, or maybe I was just tired. The apprenticeship sounded elegant on paper. In real life, it meant carrying sample boxes, printing presentations, correcting measurements, and watching senior designers present my ideas with their names on the cover slide. I was angry sometimes. I was lonely often, but nobody in Denver knew where my mother used to seat me. That meant nobody could keep me there. The firm taught me things Portland never had. I learned commercial codes, fire clearance, acoustic ratings, vendor delays, permit language, and the cruel little math of budgets. I learned that a beautiful plan means nothing if the contractor cannot build it, and a good idea can die if you do not know how to write a contract. I learned to speak to clients who cared more about cost per square foot than the people who would spend their days inside those walls. At first, I was too soft. I would say, "This space might feel harsh for children," and a client would look at me like I had brought a poem to a finance meeting. So I learned to translate feeling into numbers. Harsh waiting rooms increase stress. Bad flow slows staff. Poor acoustics reduce privacy. Confused layouts create complaints. I learned their language not because I trusted it more, but because I wanted my own language to survive in rooms that did not respect it yet. For a year, I did not answer calls from Portland. My mother left 3 voicemails. I deleted 2 without listening and listened to the 3rd only because snow had trapped me inside, and loneliness makes people careless. Her message was smooth and wounded. She hoped I was safe. She hoped I understood no one had wanted to hurt me. Merritt and Callow were taking things slowly, she said, as if that made the theft polite. She said Thanksgiving had been difficult for everyone. Everyone. That word almost made me laugh. I sat on my basement floor, surrounded by fabric samples and unpaid bills, and replayed the message twice, not because I missed her, but because a part of me still wanted to hear one sentence that sounded like regret. It never came. I deleted it and went back to building a presentation for a law office lobby where the partners wanted warm authority, which was rich people language for expensive chairs and no visible emotions. I met Soren Valek on a clinic renovation in Lakewood during my 2nd year in Denver. He was a carpenter then, though that word never felt big enough for what he did. Soren understood structure the way I understood mood. He could run a hand along a wall and know where the building had been lazy. He had quiet gray eyes, a scar along one thumb, and the calm of a man who had fixed enough things to know panic rarely helps. The clinic project was a mess. The senior designer had created a waiting room that looked impressive in renderings, but forced nervous children to sit facing the treatment hallway, where they could hear drills and see other children coming out with gauze in their mouths. I pointed it out during a site walk, and the project lead brushed me off. "The client approved the look," she said. "We're not paid for feelings." There it was again, the old family song in a new voice. After the meeting, while everyone else walked to their cars, Soren stayed behind, looking at the taped outlines on the floor. "You're right," he said. I turned, surprised. He nodded toward the hallway. "Kids will watch that door like it's a threat. Parents will spend the whole wait calming them down. Staff will start every appointment behind. He said it like it was obvious, like I was not being emotional, like I was reading something real. I stared at him too long, and he gave a small smile. You don't decorate rooms, he said. You read them. No one had ever said it that way before. Not pretty, not creative, not cute. Read. The word went into me and found a place that had been waiting. Soren and I became friends slowly. We ate lunch on upside-down paint buckets. We argued about whether beauty mattered, if the drywall was bad. We shared bad coffee from job site machines. He told me he had grown up in Wyoming, left home young, and learned carpentry from an uncle who believed every crooked shelf was a moral failure. I told him very little about my family at first. Some wounds feel embarrassing before they feel tragic. But he was easy to tell the truth too because he never rushed to decorate it. When I finally told him about Thanksgiving, about Callow and Merritt, about the Swatch book line, he did not say, they were probably trying their best. He did not say, family is complicated. He just looked at me for a long moment and said, that was a cruel thing to write. Simple, clean. No excuse built around it. I almost cried from the relief of hearing cruelty called by its name. The breaking point at the firm came 6 months later. We were designing a therapy practice for children who had been through trauma. The client wanted calm, privacy, and warmth. The partners wanted a showpiece for the website. They chose glossy surfaces, hard chairs, dramatic lighting, and a reception desk so tall a child would have to look up at it like a judge's bench. I wrote a careful memo explaining the problems. I included research. I included cost-neutral alternatives. I included a revised plan that used softer sightlines, lower furniture, better sound control, and a small corner where children could sit with their backs protected. My project director skimmed it and said, "This is thoughtful, Elowen, but the client hired us for design, not therapy." I said, "Then why are we designing a therapy office?" She did not like that. The next week, I watched them present a version of the plan that ignored almost everything I had written, but kept 2 of my color choices. The client looked uncertain. The partners smiled harder. Something old and tired rose inside me. It was not rage. Rage would have been easier. It was recognition. I knew this room. I knew what it meant to be present while people used your work and dismissed your worth. I waited until after the meeting, walked into my director's office, and gave notice. She looked genuinely shocked. People always are when the quiet person finally stops being convenient. "You're talented," she said, as if she were offering a gift. "But talent needs patience." I thought of my mother. I thought of my father's handwriting. I thought of Callow looking down at his plate. "No," I said. "Talent needs a place where it is not treated like a garnish." I left with 1 cardboard box and no plan good enough to show a banker. For 3 weeks, I was terrified. Not movie terrified. Real terrified. Rent terrified. Health insurance terrified. Grocery store math terrified. I took tiny jobs. Rearranging a tutoring center, choosing paint for a daycare, helping a chiropractor make his reception area look less like a punishment. Soren sent me leads when he could. I told myself I had made a brave choice. Some nights I believed it. Other nights I sat on my basement bed with the swatch book open and my father's sentence staring up at me like a bill I could not pay. Pretty colors don't pay rent. The cruel thing was, for a while, he was almost right. Pretty colors alone did not pay rent. But I was learning that my work had never been only colors. It was safety. It was trust. It was movement. It was the difference between a person leaving a room exhausted or feeling like they could breathe. My first real client was Juniper Crossley, a therapist with tired eyes, wild curls, and an office above a bakery in a narrow brick building near Colfax. She found me through Soren's cousin, who knew someone, which is how half of small business happens when no one has money. Juniper's practice served children and parents, but the waiting room looked like a tax office. Gray walls, buzzing lights, plastic chairs in a straight line, a check-in window with a sliding glass panel that made every conversation sound like a secret being denied. Parents came once and did not return. Children cried before sessions. Juniper blamed herself. "Maybe I'm just not good at making people comfortable," she said during our first meeting. I looked around the room and felt that old listening part of me wake up. "You are asking them to feel safe in a room that feels like it expects trouble," I said. She had almost no budget. That became the gift, though I did not know it yet. A low budget forces honesty. We could not hide behind expensive furniture. Soren helped me build simple wood shelves and a lower check-in counter. We replaced the buzzing lights with warmer fixtures. We moved the chairs so no one had their back to the door unless they chose it. We added sound panels covered in soft fabric, a small table for children, a rug that made footsteps quieter, and a private corner where parents could fill forms without feeling watched. I chose colors that did not shout calm, but allowed it. Juniper painted with us on a Sunday afternoon. Her hair tied up, bakery smell coming through the floorboards. At one point, she stood in the middle of the half-finished room and said, "It already feels like it stopped holding its breath." The changes were not dramatic in photos. That was the beautiful part. No marble, no chandelier, no expensive statement wall. But people felt it. Within a month, Juniper told me fewer children were crying before appointments. Parents stayed long enough to schedule follow-ups. Her cancellations dropped. A little boy who had refused to leave his mother's lap sat on the rug and built a crooked block tower while waiting. Juniper called me after that and cried so hard I could barely understand her. "You made them feel safe before I even opened my door," she said. I sat in my car outside a grocery store, one hand on the steering wheel, and let the sentence wash over me. It was the first time my work had paid more than a bill. It had answered something. Soren took me out for tacos that night because he said, "First victories deserved food. You could not eat neatly." We sat at a small metal table under string lights, and he raised a plastic cup of horchata, like champagne. "To reading rooms," he said. I laughed, but my throat tightened. "To rent," I said. He smiled. "That too." Then, because Soren had a way of saying serious things like he was only commenting on the weather, he said, "You should make this official." I told him I was one person with a laptop in a basement room. He said most real things started as one person and a stubborn problem. I said I did not know how to run a company. He said he knew how to build things that did not fall down, and I knew how to make people feel like they could stay. "That sounds like a company to me," he said. We named it Narrow Light Studio 2 weeks later at my tiny kitchen table. I wanted something that did not sound glossy or cute. Soren asked what I was always trying to do in a difficult space, and I said, without thinking, "Find the narrow place where light can still get in." He wrote "Narrow Light" on the back of a receipt, turned it toward me, and waited. I knew it was right before I knew why. We filed the paperwork with money I should have saved for emergencies and signed the operating agreement in blue ink at a cheap legal office beside a dry cleaner. I owned 60% because it was my design practice. Soren owned 40% because he brought construction knowledge, field relationships, and a calm I trusted more than most contracts. He refused to take more. "This started in your eyes," he said. "I'm just helping build the walls around it." Our first office was not really an office. It was one room at the back of a shared workspace with a window facing a parking lot and a heating system that clicked like an old man's knee. We had 2 secondhand desks, 4 client chairs from a hotel liquidation sale, a printer that jammed if anyone looked too confident, and 1 shelf for samples. On our first morning there, Soren brought coffee in a small frame. I thought it was for our business license. Instead, he nodded toward my swatch book. "The page," he said. I knew which page he meant. I had shown it to him once and then hidden it again. My father's sentence sat on the back of that pale blue linen sample, neat and certain. Pretty colors don't pay rent. "I don't know if I want to look at it every day," I said. Soren leaned against the desk. "Then don't frame it for pain. Frame it as evidence." I asked evidence of what? He looked around our little office at the desks, the printer, the stack of invoices, the first 3 client folders. that he was wrong in writing. I laughed then, unexpectedly, and once I started, I could not stop for a minute. Not because it was funny exactly, but because sometimes the body recognizes freedom before the mind knows what to do with it. We framed the page and hung it beside the door, not in the lobby where clients would ask questions, but where I would see it when I walked in. Under it, Soren taped our first paid invoice from Juniper. "Pretty colors don't pay rent," I said, reading the old words. Then I tapped the invoice. "Human-centered design does." The first year of Narrow Light nearly buried us. Anyone who tells you starting a company is romantic has either forgotten the invoices or never opened the mail. We worked from sunrise until our eyes burned. We designed small clinics, counseling offices, tutoring centers, a women's legal nonprofit, and one dental waiting room that smelled permanently like bubblegum fluoride no matter what we did. I learned to price my work without apologizing. That was harder than design. The first time I sent a proposal with a number that would actually pay us fairly, I felt my mother's voice whispering that I was asking too much for arranging colors. Soren saw me hovering over the send button and said, "Don't discount your work before they even get a chance to respect it." I sent it. The client accepted within an hour. I went to the bathroom and cried quietly because no one had argued me down. Little by little, people started talking. Not loudly, not in a viral way. Just in the practical way good work travels among people who need it. Juniper told another therapist, the therapist told a pediatric speech clinic, the clinic told a nonprofit. A parent wrote in a review that their child no longer panicked in the waiting room after the redesign. A staff manager told us sick days had dropped after we changed the break room and lighting. A dentist said parents seemed less tense before appointments. These were not glamorous wins. No one gave us a trophy for moving a reception desk lower so children could see the person speaking to them. But every small proof built a floor under me. I had spent my whole life being told my work was too soft to matter. Now softness was producing results people could measure. During those years, Portland became a weather system. I checked less and less. I heard things through old friends and accidental social media shadows. Merritt and Callow got engaged the spring after I left. My mother posted photos with captions about finding the right match at the right time. I did not look at them long. Looking was a way of letting old hands back into my room. A year later, they married in a vineyard outside Hood River. I was invited by email, not by phone. I did not attend. My mother left a message saying she hoped I could rise above hard feelings and be happy for my sister. I deleted it before the end. Maybe that sounds cold. It was not cold. It was survival. There are seasons when forgiveness is just another name people use for letting them stand close enough to wound you again. But I will be honest because an honest narrator is the only kind worth listening to. I was not healed. I was busy. Those are not the same thing. I worked like rest was a trap. I answered client emails at midnight. I checked invoices from bed. I corrected drawings during meals. Soren would sometimes take my laptop away and place a sandwich in front of me like he was feeding a difficult animal. "You don't have to prove you deserve the company every day," he said once. I told him I was being responsible. He shook his head. "No, you're trying to become impossible to throw away." I hated him a little for being right. Then I loved him more for saying it. Our friendship became love so quietly that neither of us knew where to mark the beginning. There was no grand confession in the rain, though Denver offered enough weather for one. There was a night after a terrible client meeting when I found Soren repairing our broken sample shelf at 11 p.m., humming off key, and I realized the room felt safe because he was in it. There was a morning when he brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it and added 3 vendor calls to his own list because he knew I had slept badly. There was a winter evening when my car would not start and he showed up with jumper cables, gloves, and no complaint. Love, I learned, is not always a firework. Sometimes it is a man standing in a parking lot in freezing wind saying, "Start it now," and smiling when the engine turns over. By the 4th year, Narrow Light had real employees. Not many, but enough that the office no longer echoed. We hired Mara Belweth as operations lead, a sharp woman with silver-streaked hair and the ability to make chaos feel embarrassed of itself. We hired 2 junior designers, an acoustic consultant part-time, and a project coordinator who labeled everything more aggressively than my old basement landlord. We moved into a better office on the edge of downtown Denver, with actual conference rooms, a materials library, a small reception area, and a glass wall we could not really afford, but signed for anyway, because sometimes a business needs to see itself clearly before the world does. On the wall behind reception, in clean black letters, we placed the name Narrow Light Studio. Under it, smaller but visible, founder and principal designer Elowen Rusk. The first morning I saw my name there, I stood alone in the lobby before anyone arrived and whispered, "It was serious when it was small, too." That became one of our quiet rules. Small did not mean unserious. A one-room therapy office mattered. A daycare hallway mattered. A staff break room mattered. A clinic check-in counter mattered. We built our reputation on refusing to treat human comfort as decoration. If a client wanted only a luxury surface over a broken experience, we walked away. Not always easily. Sometimes walking away hurt our budget. Sometimes I had to sit with Mara and stare at numbers until my chest tightened. But every time we said no to the wrong project, the company became more itself. Soren said principles were like load-bearing walls. You could remove them to make the room look bigger, but eventually the roof would come down. I wrote that on a sticky note and kept it inside my desk. Our first major public recognition came from a regional business magazine that ran a feature titled "The Denver Studio Changing How People Feel at Work." It was not a national cover. It did not make us famous overnight, but it brought calls from larger clinics, medical groups, and companies that had finally realized people did not do their best work in spaces that treated them like machines. The article included a photo of me standing in our materials library, one hand on a stack of samples, looking calmer than I felt. My mother would have liked that photo, I thought, when I saw it, not because it was me, but because it looked respectable. For the first time, that thought did not ruin the day. I printed the article and hung it in my office under the framed swatch page. My father's handwriting above, my company's proof below. A small private museum of being underestimated. I thought often about the strange mercy of distance. In Portland, every object had carried a family meaning: the good chair, the achievement wall, the dining room, the kitchen where my mother lowered her voice. In Denver, I built new meanings. A desk was not where I waited for approval. It was where I signed proposals. A conference room was not where people decided my future without me. It was where I asked better questions than the clients expected. A waiting room was not punishment. It was a promise that people would be cared for before the formal meeting began. I had not forgotten what happened. Forgetting is overrated. I had simply built a life where the memory had less furniture. Then, near the end of our 5th year in business, a project inquiry came through Mara's system on a cold Tuesday morning. I was between meetings, eating an apple over the sink in our tiny office kitchen, because apparently owning a company does not teach a person how to take lunch. Mara appeared in the doorway with her tablet and the expression she used when a project was either very good or very annoying. "Emergency clinic redesign," she said. "Pediatric dental group. Expansion in trouble. Investors nervous. Reviews mention cold environment, frightened kids, staff stress. They want a fast consultation." I took the tablet and scanned the summary. The request had come through a consulting firm called Dane Strategic Growth. My eyes moved over the name without stopping. Dane was not rare, but it was not impossible either, and by then I had trained myself not to turn every shadow into Portland. The clinic name was listed as Merit Pediatric Dental Group, but the system shortened it on the front page to MPDG Expansion Review. I did not see Merit's full name in the first summary. I saw a broken patient experience. I saw children afraid before treatment. I saw parents writing reviews that said the space felt cold and intimidating. I saw staff leaving because the flow made every day harder. The problem was so exactly the kind of problem Narrow Light existed to solve that my professional mind woke up before my personal history could catch it. Send the intake packet, I said. But tell them we don't do cosmetic emergency fixes. If they want us, we review the whole experience. Mara nodded. That may scare them off. Good, I said. Then they were never our client. 2 days later, the packet came back. It was polished, urgent, and a little dishonest in the way desperate documents often are. The consulting firm wanted us to refresh the environment before an investor walkthrough. They wanted better photos, warmer finishes, a more premium look. But buried in the attachments were patient comments, staff notes, and layout complaints that told the real story. Children cried in the waiting room because the treatment doors were visible. Parents felt exposed at check-in. The play area was placed under a television running news channels no child wanted to hear. The lighting made everything look sterile and unforgiving. The staff break room was a windowless closet with a microwave. The clinic had been designed to impress adults funding it, not children using it. I remember reading the notes and feeling that familiar anger, the useful kind, not personal anger, work anger, the kind that says, this space is lying about what it cares about. Should we take the meeting? Mara asked. I looked through the packet again. The founder's full name was somewhere in the attached legal documents, but I did not open that file. Mara handled ownership checks unless something looked dangerous. I focused on the experience map, the reviews, the floor plan. That discipline had made me good at my job. We judged projects by how they treated people when no one important was watching. The clinic was failing that test. Yes, I said finally, but in person. Here, I want them to see what a patient-centered office feels like before they ask me to paint over a broken one. Mara smiled. You're in a mood. I'm in a profession, I said. We scheduled the consultation for the following week. Dane's Strategic Growth requested to bring 4 people, their lead consultant, the clinic owner, and 2 family investors. That was common enough. Medical practices often mixed business and family money in ways that made meetings more emotional than anyone admitted. I approved the visitor list without reading the names. That might sound careless now, but life is full of ordinary decisions that later look like fate wearing a plain coat. At the time, they were just another clinic group with a bad waiting room and a consultant trying to make a deeper problem look like a branding issue. I had no idea that in Portland, my mother was likely choosing a travel outfit and telling herself she was going to help Merit protect her future. I had no idea my father was packing the suit he wore to serious financial meetings. I had no idea Callow Dane was walking toward my office with the same polished confidence he once wore at my parents' table, not knowing he was about to ask the woman he had abandoned to save the business built on his second choice. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed in my office and reviewed the clinic floor plan one more time. The city outside the glass was turning blue with winter dusk. Soren came in quietly and set a cup of tea on my desk. He had learned not to ask if I had eaten until he had already provided evidence. Hard project, he asked. Important one, I said. He looked at the plan over my shoulder. Bad flow. Very bad. He pointed to the waiting area. Kids can see too much. Exactly. We talked through possible solutions for 20 minutes, easy and focused, the way we had in job sites. Years before, we had employees and payroll and a glass wall with my name on it. Then he noticed my eyes moving to the framed swatch page. Old voice loud today? He asked. I smiled a little. Quieter than it used to be. He touched the frame with one knuckle right below my father's words. Good. I did not know why I looked at that page so long after he left. Maybe some part of me heard footsteps before the door opened. Maybe the body remembers patterns faster than the mind reads names. Pretty colors don't pay rent. The sentence had once felt like a verdict. Then it became a joke. Then evidence. That night, it felt like a question waiting for someone else to answer. I turned off my office lamp, walked through the reception area, and paused by the glass wall. Narrow light studio. Founder and principal designer, Elowen Rusk. For years, I had built rooms for people who needed to feel safe, respected, and seen. I thought I had built this one for them, too. I did not understand yet that I had also built it for the morning when my past would walk in, sit in my waiting room, and finally have to read the name on the door. The consultation was set for Thursday at 10. Mara sent the confirmation. I went home. I slept badly but blamed the workload. I had no dream, no warning, no dramatic feeling in my chest. The next morning, I came in early, reviewed 2 hospital concepts, answered 6 emails, and approved a material sample for a school counseling center. Life continued in its practical way, laying normal moments right up against the edge of the extraordinary. By Wednesday night, the clinic packet sat in a folder on my desk, marked for a review. I had highlighted the patient complaints. I had written notes in the margin: lower sight lines, softer entry, parent privacy, staff dignity, no cosmetic fix. I thought I was preparing to meet another anxious medical group with more money than understanding. I was wrong. I was preparing to meet my family. And as I closed the folder that night, one sentence sat at the top of my notes in dark blue ink, written for the clients I still believed were strangers. A space tells the truth about who matters. I did not know it yet, but the next morning, my office was going to tell that truth better than I ever could. A space tells the truth about who matters. I did not know it yet, but the next morning, my office was going to tell that truth better than I ever could. Thursday came cold and bright, with that sharp Denver sunlight that makes every window look too honest. I arrived before 8, mostly out of habit, and stood for a moment in the reception area with my coffee cooling in my hand. Narrow light always felt different before the team arrived. Softer. Almost private. The glass wall behind the front desk caught the morning light and held our name in clean black letters. Narrow Light Studio. Founder and principal designer, Elowen Rusk. I had seen that wall hundreds of times, but that morning I looked at it longer than usual. Maybe some part of me already knew. Maybe the past makes a sound when it is close, even before anyone opens the door. Mara came in at 8:30 with her usual calm storm of folders, messages, and practical judgment. She reminded me that the dental group would arrive at 10. She said the consultant had pushed twice for a shorter meeting because the investors wanted quick visual recommendations before their bank review. That annoyed me before I even knew who he was. Quick visual recommendations were what people asked for when they wanted a fresh coat of paint over a cracked foundation. I told Mara to keep the full 90 minutes. If they want 10-minute decorating, I said, they can buy a lamp. Mara smiled, made a note, and left me with the packet. I opened it again, not to look for names, but to study the plan. I was still thinking like a designer. I was still safe. At 9:53, my receptionist, Willa, messaged me through the office chat. Your 10 o'clock is here. 4 guests. I was in the small conference room, laying out printed floor plans beside material samples. I remember smoothing one page with my palm and seeing my own handwriting at the top. A space tells the truth about who matters. Then I heard voices through the glass. Not words at first, just tone. A woman's careful disappointment. A man's low answer. A younger woman's tired silence. And a male voice that had once told me he loved the way I noticed rooms. My body recognized him before my mind allowed it. I stepped toward the frosted glass wall beside the conference room and looked out through the narrow, clear strip near the door. Callow Dane stood at reception in a navy suit, one hand resting on a leather folder like it was proof he still belonged in serious rooms. His hair had a little gray at the temples now, and his face had the polished tension of a man trying to sell confidence he did not have in stock. Beside him stood Merritt, my sister, in a cream coat and expensive shoes, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. My father Benton stood behind them, older than I remembered, his shoulders slightly folded. And my mother Corinne, perfectly dressed in slate blue, was looking around my office with that measuring expression I knew too well. She was judging the chairs, the light, the receptionist, the plants, the whole room, not knowing the room had already judged her back. For 1 second, I was 26 again, standing in my mother's kitchen with a plate in my hand and a sentence in my chest. Pretty colors don't pay rent. Then I saw my name on the glass wall behind Willa, steady and black in the morning light, and I came back to myself. I did not run. I did not hide. I did not ask Mara to take the meeting. I straightened the edge of my blazer, opened the conference room door, and walked into my own reception area. Willa smiled, professional and unaware of the history standing in front of her. "Miss Rusk is ready for you," she said. Callow turned first. His polite business smile was already forming when his eyes met mine. I watched recognition cross his face in pieces. First surprise, then disbelief, then a kind of panic he tried to swallow. Merritt saw me next. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. My father looked from my face to the wall, and then back to my face, as if one of them had to be lying. My mother was last. She followed the direction of Benton's stare and finally read the words behind reception. Founder and principal designer, Elowen Rusk. Her face changed in a way I had waited years to see and never allowed myself to imagine. Not simple shock, not even shame. It was the look of a woman realizing that a story she had told confidently for 7 years had just lost the room. "Elowen?" she said. My name came out small, almost careful, as if it might break if she said it too loudly. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm. That surprised me most. "Welcome to Narrowlight Studio." Callow's hand moved forward automatically, then stopped halfway, unsure if a handshake belonged to business or to the past. I let him solve that problem alone. My mother recovered first, because Corinne Rusk always recovered first. Her face warmed with a smile that had arrived too quickly to be real. "Sweetheart," she said, opening her arms slightly. "Look at this. Look at all you've done. We had no idea." "No," I said. "You didn't." The words were not loud, but they closed something. Her arms lowered. Merritt looked at the floor. My father cleared his throat the old way, but this time no announcement followed. The power had moved rooms and left him without a script. Mara appeared beside me, sharp eyes taking in the situation. She did not know the whole story, but she knew enough about my face to understand this was not an ordinary meeting. "Would you like me to reschedule?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "They came for a consultation. We can give them one." Then I turned back to the 4 people who had once discussed my future while I sat in front of them. "You're here as potential clients today," I said. "That is all this meeting is. If that works for everyone, we can begin." My mother's smile flickered. Callow nodded too fast. "Of course," he said. "Absolutely. We're all professionals here." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because 7 years earlier that word had been used like a locked gate. Now he was offering it to me like a peace treaty. We moved into the conference room. I had designed that room myself. The table was round-edged walnut, large enough for serious work, but not so large that people could hide behind distance. The chairs were comfortable without being soft. The light was warm, even, and honest. On the far wall hung framed project photos, client letters, and one small pale blue fabric sample with my father's handwriting on the back. I did not look at it when we entered. I did not need to. I knew exactly where it was. Everyone waited for me to sit first. I took the chair nearest the display screen, the one our team jokingly called the founder's chair. Not because it was bigger. It wasn't. Because from there I could see the door, the screen, the wall, and every face at the table. My mother noticed. Of course she did. Corinne noticed every arrangement of power. That had always been her gift and her weapon. I opened the folder. I reviewed the patient comments, staff notes, and current layout. I'm going to be direct because your situation seems time-sensitive. Your clinic does not have a visual problem. It has a trust problem. Callow leaned forward. Right? And that's why we need a warmer premium refresh before the investor review. No, I said. That is not what I mean. The room went still. In my old life, I would have softened the next sentence. I would have made my voice smaller so no one felt corrected. I had built a company by unlearning that. The space is designed to impress adults with money, I said. It is not designed for children who are scared, parents who are stressed, or staff who have to move through it all day. The reception desk is too high. The treatment hallway is visible from the waiting area. The seating gives parents no privacy. The lighting is harsh. The play area is placed where children can hear clinical sounds. The staff break room tells your employees they are an afterthought. You can change finishes and take better photos, but the experience will still be broken. Merritt looked at the floor plan like she had never really seen it before. That was the first moment I felt something other than anger toward her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. Merritt had a real career, yes. She also had a life built by people who cared more about how it looked than how it felt. In that way, the clinic was more honest than anyone wanted it to be. Callow's jaw tightened. "We appreciate the depth," he said, using the voice I remembered from bank meetings, smooth and empty. "But the immediate need is investor confidence. We don't have time for a full patient journey study." "Then you don't have time for narrow light," I said. My mother inhaled sharply. My father looked at me then, really looked at me. Maybe for the first time since I was a child, asking why my work wasn't on the achievement wall. Callow gave a small laugh, trying to make the room less serious. "Elowen, come on. We don't need to make this difficult. We all know there's history here, but this could actually be good. Full circle, maybe. You helping Merritt. Us working together after all these years." There it was. The personal angle. The old hand reaching across the table, hoping I still needed to be chosen. I closed the folder. "Callow, I am going to say this once. I am not here to heal the story you helped create. I am here to decide whether my company can ethically take this project." His face reddened. Merritt looked up quickly. My mother's eyes sharpened. "And ethically?" I continued. "We cannot support a cosmetic redesign that hides patient distress from investors. If narrow light takes this on, the scope changes. We interview staff, we observe patient flow, we redesign for children first, parents second, staff always, and investors last. The budget becomes transparent. The timeline becomes honest. And you, Callow, do not lead the project." The silence after that was clean and wide. Callow stared at me. "Excuse me? You are the consultant who framed this as a visual refresh while the documents show a deeper operational problem. That tells me either you did not understand the issue or you understood it and tried to bury it. Neither makes you the right lead." My mother's face flushed. "That is a very harsh accusation." "It is a professional assessment," I said. A harsh accusation would be easier to argue with. For a second, I saw Callow exactly as he had been at that Thanksgiving table, a man waiting to see which side of the room had more power before deciding what he believed. Only this time, the room belonged to me. Merritt's voice came out quiet. "What would happen if we did it your way?" Everyone turned to her. My mother looked almost betrayed. Callow looked annoyed. I looked at my sister and saw the first honest question of the morning. "You would have to slow down," I said. "You would have to admit to your investors that the clinic needs more than polish. You would have to let staff tell the truth without punishment. You would have to design around the children who are actually afraid, not the adults you want to impress." Merritt swallowed. "And if we don't?" "Then you may get through one review," I said. "Maybe. But the same problems will keep showing up in reviews, cancellations, employee turnover, and patient stress. A space tells the truth about who matters. Right now, your clinic says investors matter first." My father's eyes moved to the wall behind me. I saw the moment he noticed the framed swatch page. His face tightened. At first I thought he simply recognized the book. Then he leaned forward slightly and read the words written in his own hand. "Pretty colors don't pay rent." His mouth opened a little. No sound came out. My mother followed his gaze. Her eyes narrowed, then widened. Merritt read it too. Callow looked last, and for once he seemed to understand. He was not the most important old wound in the room. I turned in my chair and looked at the frame with them. The pale blue fabric had faded slightly over the years, but the ink remained clear. Benton Rusk's handwriting. His little verdict, his careless lesson, Hanging on the wall of the company, it had failed to stop. My father said my name under his breath. Elowen. I faced him. That was the first business advice this family ever gave me, I said. I kept it because it was wrong in a useful way. His face folded. It was not enough, but it was real. My mother, however, reached for anger because anger had always been easier for her than shame. You framed that? She said. After all these years, you kept it just to humiliate us? No, I said. I kept it because I needed to remember the difference between people who judge work from a distance and people who actually build it. You planned this, she said, voice low and shaking now. You let us come here. You wanted us to sit in this room and feel small. I looked at her for a long moment. She was still trying to make herself the center of the injury. It almost impressed me, that old skill of hers. I did not invite you as family, I said. Your consultant requested a meeting. My team scheduled it. I built a company. You walked into it. Merritt closed her eyes. Something in her shoulders dropped, like a string had been cut. Soren entered then, carrying a revised floor plan Mara had printed for him. He paused when he saw the room, and I watched him understand enough from the faces. He came to my side, calm as ever, and placed the plan on the table. This is Soren Valek, I said, co-owner and operations director of Narrowlight. My mother's eyes moved over him, searching for a category. Worker, husband, partner, threat. Soren gave her no help. He simply nodded. We can support this project, he said, looking at Merritt, not Callow. But only if the purpose changes. We don't build pretty covers for broken systems. We build spaces people can trust. The word trust landed harder than any insult could have. Callow pushed back his chair. This is ridiculous. Merritt, we came here for help, not a lecture from the founder, Merritt said. Her voice was still quiet, but it stopped him. Maybe because she had never stopped him in that tone before. Maybe because for the first time all morning she sounded like the owner of her own name. Callow stared at her. You can't seriously want to hand control of your clinic to her. Merritt looked at me, then at the framed swatch page, then at our floor plans spread across the table. I don't think control has been helping me, she said. My mother stood. Merritt, think carefully. Merritt laughed once, a small, broken sound. That's all I've ever done, Mom. Think carefully. Choose carefully. Sit correctly. Smile correctly. Build the kind of life people can praise at dinner. She looked at me then, and her eyes filled, though she did not cry. I thought having the real career meant I had won, but I don't think I chose half of it freely. I did not move toward her. That was important. Her pain was real, but it did not erase mine. I could witness it without carrying it. Callow's face hardened. So that's it? You're cutting me out because Elowen says so? No, Merritt said. I'm cutting you out because my clinic is failing, and you tried to make it look expensive instead of making it better. That was the moment Callow lost the room, not because I punished him. Because the truth finally found another voice. The meeting ended with terms, clear ones. Narrowlight would send a revised proposal directly to Merritt Pediatric Dental Group. Callow's consulting firm would not be part of the project. The first phase would include staff interviews, parent feedback, child-centered layout changes, and a transparent report for investors. If Merritt wanted us, she would sign as the clinic owner. If my parents remained investors, they would receive updates, not control. My mother hated every word. My father said nothing. Callow gathered his folder with a hand that shook slightly and left before anyone else, his polished shoes clicking too loudly down the hall. When the door closed behind him, the room felt larger. Merritt stayed seated. She looked exhausted but also strangely younger, like someone who had finally put down a heavy bag she had been pretending was part of her body. I'm sorry, she said to me. Not just for Callow, for all of it, for letting them make me the proof that you were wrong. I took a slow breath. I had imagined apologies before. In the ugly years, I had built whole speeches in my head. What I would say, how they would cry, how justice would feel. The real thing was quieter and more complicated. Thank you for saying it. I said. It matters. It doesn't fix it. She nodded. I know. My mother made a soft sound of offense, as if my refusal to perform instant forgiveness was another failure of manners. But she did not speak. For once, there was no sentence ready that could make her look generous. Merritt left after that, walking out alone, not beside Callow and not behind my mother. It was a small thing. It was also not small at all. My mother left next. At the reception door, she turned back. Her face had rebuilt itself into something controlled, but her eyes were still bright with anger. I hope you're proud, she said. I stood beside the conference table, my hand resting on the folder. I am, I said. She flinched, maybe because she had expected guilt and found none. Then she walked out, slate blue coat swinging behind her like a curtain closing on a bad performance. My father remained. Benton Rusk, who had spent my childhood avoiding emotional rooms, stood under the framed sentence he had written and looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Soren touched my shoulder once and left us alone. For a long moment, my father said nothing. Then he pointed weakly toward the frame. I wrote that because I was scared for you. No, I said. My voice was gentle, but I did not let him move the truth. You wrote it because you thought struggling made my work less real. He closed his eyes. It was real when it was small, I said. It was real when I was broke. It was real before the office, before the article, before the clients you would respect. You just couldn't see value unless it came dressed like something you already understood. He nodded slowly. His eyes were wet now, and years ago that might have undone me. But I had learned that tears are not always repair. Sometimes they are just proof that the wall finally felt the weather. You built something serious, he said. I looked at him, at the old banker suit, at the tired hands, at the man who had once held a pen over my swatch book, and thought he was teaching me reality. It was serious when it was small, too, I said again. He had no answer because there was no answer good enough. He left a minute later, and I watched him pass the glass wall with my name on it. This time, he read it slowly before he stepped out. After they were gone, the office settled back into its normal sounds. A printer started somewhere. Willa answered a call. Mara spoke softly with a vendor. Life did not pause to honor my private earthquake. I appreciated that. There was mercy in ordinary noise. Soren found me in my office, standing in front of the framed swatch page. You okay? He asked. I thought about lying, then didn't. I think I am. He came to stand beside me. We looked at the old sentence together. For years, I said, I thought revenge would feel louder. What does it feel like? I looked through the glass wall toward the reception area where my family had waited that morning without knowing they were sitting inside the answer to every doubt they had thrown at me. It feels like not needing them to understand the room anymore. Soren smiled softly. That sounds better than loud. It is. Merritt signed the revised proposal 2 weeks later, not through Callow, directly. The project was hard. Honest projects usually are. Staff cried during interviews. Parents told stories Merritt had never heard because no one had asked the right questions. The investors were not pleased at first, but the transparent report gave them something stronger than pretty photos. It gave them a plan. 6 months later, the clinic reopened with lower desks, softer light, better sound control, a hidden treatment entry, a real staff room, and a waiting area where children could choose where they felt safest sitting. The reviews changed slowly, staff turnover slowed. Children still got scared sometimes because children are honest and dental work is dental work. But the building stopped making fear worse. Merritt and I did not become close overnight. Stories lie when they make one apology fix a whole childhood. We spoke carefully at first, mostly about the project. Then sometimes about other things. She told me she had separated from Callow. I did not ask for details. She told me our mother said I had turned her against the family. I believed that immediately. Corinne needed a villain, the way some rooms need windows. Merritt said she was learning to want things without checking if they looked impressive first. I told her that sounded like good work. It was the most sisterly thing I could say at the time. My father sent one letter months later, not an email. A real letter, which was very Benton. It said he was sorry for writing what he wrote, and sorrier for believing it. It said he had confused fear with wisdom. It said he hoped one day I might let him see the office. Again, not as an investor, not as a client, just as my father. I kept the letter in a drawer. I did not answer right away. Maybe I would someday. Maybe I would not. Peace, I learned, does not always require a reunion. As for my mother, she never apologized. Not really. She sent one message saying she was glad I had found a way to use my creativity in a practical direction. I read it twice, laughed once, and deleted it. There are some rooms you stop redesigning because the owner likes them cold. A year after that morning, Narrow Light expanded to the floor above us. At the small team celebration, Willa printed new temporary signs for the elevator, and I watched her tape one up with our name on it. Narrow Light Studio, floors 3 and 4. I thought about the girl in Portland who had sat near the sideboard, close enough to carry extra dishes, far enough to be forgotten. I wished I could tell her that one day people would wait outside her office because her time mattered. I wished I could tell her that the sentence in the swatch book would not be the end of the story. It would only be the receipt from a debt she no longer owed. That night, after everyone left, Soren and I turned off the lights ourselves. We still did that sometimes. The office glowed softly from the city outside. I paused at the reception wall and placed my hand under my name, not dramatically, just to feel the cool glass. For so long, I had wanted my family to walk into a room and finally see me. Then they did. And the strange, beautiful truth was that by the time it happened, I no longer needed it to live. My family chose my sister because she had what they called a real career. They chose the white coat, the clean title, the easy explanation. They chose the man who looked safer beside her. They chose the story they could tell at dinner without embarrassment. And I left with 2 suitcases, a swatch book, and a sentence meant to make me smaller. But people are not only what their families can explain. Work is not only real when someone else respects it. A dream is not childish just because it begins with samples, sketches, late nights, and fear. I built rooms for people who had been made uncomfortable by places that were supposed to care for them. Somewhere along the way, I built one for myself. And when the people who once judged me walked into that room, I did not have to shout. I did not have to hurt them. I did not have to beg them to admit they were wrong. The wall said my name. The company did the talking. The truth had furniture, light, payroll, contracts, and a door they had to wait outside of. That was enough. So if someone in your life has ever called your dream too small, too soft, too strange, or too unrealistic because they could not imagine where it might lead, let this be your sign. Stop begging people to understand the room you are building. Build it anyway. Learn the business. Pay attention to the details. Protect your standards. Put your name on the door. And when the people who doubted you finally walk in, you may discover the best revenge is not making them feel small. It is realizing they no longer decide how big you are. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if you have ever had to build your own room after being pushed out of someone else's. And subscribe for more stories where quiet people finally get their moment.